This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post, brought to you by the Fort Hall School of Government, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 5th of May 2020, and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am GK, and in case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, human trials for COVID-19 drugs set to start in Kenya. In the Standard, how crisis is messing up our children. And in the Star, EACC now targets Sanko's 500 million Upper Hill assets.
My goodness, what a mouthful, always.
But also the Daily Nation today has a mouthful as well.
Yeah.
May we begin with the Star?
Yes.
Sanko's onslaught seems to be continuing. There was a set and sale agreement done last year in April, in which Sanko tried to purchase a piece of land in Upper Hill, currently where his offices are. The property is worth 498 million. However, Sanko has only paid 144.6 million. Now, the deal or the transaction is such that he was supposed to have paid a certain amount, he gets certain documents. As the
Process
goes on, then he would continue to pay. However, the other side of the deal, Kenya Railway former trustees of the Retirement Benefits Scheme, Corporate and Trust Pension Services, has not furnished him with the documents in which he would then have completed the transaction. Now, the Star headline would have you believe that Sanko already owns this building.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is worth 500 million. The truth is not yet. He doesn't own it yet. And on this, it seems that it's the Kenya Railway guys who have not kept their end of the bargain.
Yeah.
Now, if EACC is telling us that they're trying to target this property so that they can say that the sources of wealth were ill-gotten, then I can understand. But as of now,
the story isn't over
it's
yet.
not over, and
it's
highly
speculative.
highly speculative.
And a very misleading headline. I mean, I'm not the biggest Sanko fan.
Yeah.
However, I think that in a circumstance like this, it is really innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, and this is for dramatic effect. And I think,
definitely.
they're playing on the fact that it would seem that the system is aggressing Sanko in this instance. He's been pushing back on wanting his city back. And they're saying, not yet. We were going to do something Putin always does, which is the legal squeeze for your political enemies.
And Sanko actually has the upper hand right now in dealing with the Nairobi Metropolitan Services. So the only way for the national government to get its way is to get him impeached.
Put him in a corner,
Yes. So there's a famous saying that says, for my friends, everything, for my enemies, the law. So there you go.
All right.
Well, we have a 3-part criteria that we're going to use to break down the headlines. We're going to ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy?
Toss the Star. Misleading,
Toss
too
it.
long.
Speculative.
Shall
we move to the Daily Nation? There are
Yes.
human trials.
Absolutely. So the Nation reports that human trials for COVID-19 drugs are set to start in Kenya. Local researchers are participating in an international study and are seeking final approvals from the Poisons and Pharmacies Board and the National Council of Science, Technology and Innovation to conduct clinical trials on 3 drugs. 2 which are related to HIV and AIDS, and 1 the malaria drug.
Yeah.
These are Remdesivir, that's an antiretroviral drug, hydroxychloroquine, which we are all familiar with, and Lopinavir, also an antiretroviral drug. And these have been approved for further study to see if they can combat COVID-19 cases in Asia as well as the US and China. So the idea is to get started here in Kenya, do clinical trials, and find out whether they work.
Do you guys remember the overreaction?
Yes.
Last
Couple of weeks when the Oxford trials were coming up. But I think this is how science moves forward.
But you know the reason we reacted so sharply, so sternly, is only because it came from Wazungus. If it was other Africans, if it was a Senegalese,
we would have said,
telling us, let's go to Kenya and do trials, maybe we would have been like, okay.
But I think the important...
But Wazungu attitude.
The important thing, I think, is for people to read the headline and the paper in context, right?
Yeah.
I think the most important thing is that researchers are participating in an international study. It's not isolated that only Africans are being targeted. It's something that we have to participate globally, you know, under different climates, different races. I know race is a big deal, but it's important. There's different circumstances to see how these drugs would react, you know, on different people.
On different people, absolutely.
Kenyans should not overreact.
Well, what do we say about the headline?
Good one.
Yeah, I think it's a good
mouthful,
headline.
But positive.
What I like is that it's not sensationalist.
Okay.
I think it just gets straight to the point.
As it is. In the Standard, there's a crisis and it's messing up our children.
Yes. First and foremost, I think this headline is way too informal. I think the use of saying, you know, messing up, I think that's a bit too colloquial. That's not appropriate for a headline.
For headline.
But regardless, the headline is discussing how children may never fully recover from the effects of staying out of school because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the Ministry of Education's the Basic Education COVID-19 Emergency Response Plan, they are looking at a report that is discussing how this is going to affect kids long term. So they say 90,000 schools are shut, 18 million students are not in school. And so what are these effects going to be? You know, some students are going to be put into work during this moment. And even when the bans for school are lifted, will they be allowed to go back to school? What consequences will they suffer long term? And a lot of this is targeted to low income children. I think it's a very important, you know, topic to discuss. However, I think what is the next policy decision that will be made? I think a lot of the time we have these discussions, we look at studies, we see what's happening around the world, and then it stops there. I think the next step should be policy, legislation. What is going to happen to make this impactful?
Yeah, and interestingly, a lot of European countries are opening up their schools. So maybe we will get to...
Italy is reopening slowly.
And guys, there's a chance that this will be our new normal. You know, until we get a vaccine, we have to restart the economy.
Let them go back to school.
And kids will have to go back to school because can we really shut down everything for a whole year or 18 months, as they're saying, before vaccine is found? And also a vaccine may never be found.
That's also true.
That's also a probability. So,
interesting time. So who do we give our winning headline, guys?
Daily Nation. The Standard does not deserve it.
Okay, there you have it. Daily Nation gives us our winning headline. Onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a three-part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy? So if we start with the Daily Nation. Haha, this looks like a fun game. We have something that looks like a sweepstakes or a lottery. And inside the drum is a caricature of Raila Odinga. And he's holding a ball behind his back. It means he's picked it up. And he's also in the process of swiveling. So if you played the game, you know that it should be one person on the outside, nobody
Not inside.
Swiveling. But then you have a caricature of Uhuru Kenyatta. And behind him you have Atoli. And behind him you have Murathe with his notebook. Maybe it has Jubilee Party notes. And then in the pool of balls is a caricature of Gideon Moi and one of Orengo.
Honestly, I think that is the best caricature ever drawn of Gideon Moi.
I think so too.
It captures him so perfectly.
It is the shape of his head.
The eyebrow,
And then on the drum it says all-inclusive cabinet. And obviously we can see that it's not inclusive.
It's not inclusive. Conspicuously absent is William Ruto.
And his allies.
And his allies, exactly, the usual suspects. But also Mudavadi is missing, Kalonzo is missing. Where do these people feature in the post-COVID political landscape constellation?
So they're telling us this is how the government of national unity is going
to come into play.
And the other funny thing is that the game is deliberately skewed in favor of Raila, as you can see.
And Uhuru, and they spin it together.
Absolutely, and that is the nature of politics generally. Political processes have their owners, and these are the owners of politics in Kenya, at least right now.
Fantastic. Can we park it?
We park it.
Yes. So in the Standard, we have Noah's Ark, or a boat of some kind. And we see it's carrying people over a body of water that is infested with coronavirus. And I think the cartoon is probably relating to the severe flooding we've been seeing in parts of the country. Many people have been forced to flee in Western Kenya. And Yeah, people are dying.
Yeah.
Apparently, as of
Very
Thursday
unfortunate.
last week, 116 people had died.
Yeah, mudslides, people who are
Floods.
swimming over their roads. Yeah, it's
Yes.
incredibly sad.
So this one is showing us the combination of floods and corona.
And corona.
Together.
We are people under siege.
Imagine.
But we will survive. In the star, we have ozone. And ozone is a very clever one. He's drawn a graph, and we've all been talking about flattening the curve. So you can see a very sharp looking curve, and you have at the bottom of it Uhuru Kenyatta, and he's flattening coronavirus, or trying to. And then you have CS Kagwe struggling to hold on to it, and you also have Joho there hanging onto the curve. And then at the very tip, at the highest point where you have many cases of corona, you
Kashaman
have
himself.
Stubborn.
the president of Tanzania, Magufuli. And he seems fine. He seems quite nonchalant. He's even like folding his hands and sort of like, what's the big deal? What are you guys talking about? But it also,
not very clever.
yeah, and I think it speaks to the interconnected nature between Kenya and Tanzania. Because a lot of cases have shown up at the border point between
Yes.
truck drivers who are going back and forth.
Yeah.
Is this what you call tempting fate?
I think so.
Is that a correct use
Yeah,
of the term?
I think so.
I think
Yeah,
so.
but he's really playing with fire.
He is
here.
playing with
He
fire.
He doesn't know how bad corona can get.
Exactly.
And the CS had a very good press conference on, I think it was Friday last week, CS for Health, and he explained to us, he showed us the curve, and he explained to Kenyans why we've managed to sort of flatten the curve, and it's because of taking these precautionary measures
Yes.
early on, and even taking extreme measures, locking down the city, locking down so many other spaces. It really has made a difference,
It made
and
a
we are
difference.
seeing it
However,
now.
I will say that I think Kenyans are beginning to take it for granted. Yesterday on the roads in Nairobi, I was surprised
Traffic.
to see, the traffic, how many people were out on the streets, very close to each other. And I think if you were to compare what the stage at which Kenya is at right now, we're just about to pass, or we have passed 500 cases. I think that if you look at other countries, once they pass 500 cases, that's where things started to get a little sticky. So I think we should continue to hold our breath, not get too excited just yet.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So who do we give our winning cartoon? I think we toss Gado, sorry.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So it's between Ozone and Dula.
I think they're both really good cartoons.
Yeah, they're both
Can
good.
we give them
can't
a
decide.
tie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
sure.
there you have it. Winning cartoon from both Dula and Ozone. What is our final thought?
And now our final thought. Today is inspired by a book we've actually looked at before entitled Factfulness, 10 Reasons We're Wrong About the World and Why Things Are Better Than You Think. And this book was written by a man named Hans Rosling with his son and his daughter-in-law. So most people have a grossly inaccurate view of the world we live in. When we're asked simple questions about global trends, we constantly get the answers wrong and see the world as much worse than it actually is. So Hans Rosling devoted most of his life to teaching people about how to see the world accurately. He wanted to help everybody act a little bit more reasonably and to be more in tune with what reality actually is. So this book was completed posthumously because he passed away, I think, in 2017. But after a long and successful career as one of the foremost thinkers in public health and statistics, this is probably one of his most influential books. And it's actually a favorite of Bill Gates. So he suggests that a vast majority of human beings are wrong about the state of the world, perceiving it to be poorer, less healthy, and more dangerous than it actually is. Therefore, we tend to have an over-exaggerated and overly negative view of the world, which creates unnecessary fear and unnecessary stress. So when we're operating in this world of wrong facts, we're unable to develop sound decisions or good solutions for these problems that we may find. So a bulk of the book is dedicated to these 10 instincts that he says stop us from seeing the world factfully. And these range from the fear instinct, we pay more attention to scary things. The size instinct, standalone numbers often look more impressive or more scary than they actually are. And the single perspective instinct, which is us understanding the world through a single lens, but there's plenty more. And with each one, he offers practical advice about how to overcome these innate biases we have when addressing statistics, numbers, and news. And he argues that these instincts make it very difficult for us to put things into perspective. So if we were actually to look at the numbers, we have cut down hugely the amount of people who live in extreme poverty. He says by about half in the last 20 years, but we wouldn't actually ever know that. Why? Because there's never ever a headline that would say poverty cut in half. Because a lot of these changes happen incrementally, they happen very slowly, so you don't notice that it's ongoing. But also as human beings, we're not built to process information that way. So for example, one of my favorite instincts he talks about is the gap instinct. And it describes our tendency to describe two distinct things, and often two conflicting things, and imagine a gap in between them. So for example, he calls the words developing world or developed world outdated and meaningless, and I could not agree more. And he says that to understand poverty better, he proposes that we look at poverty in terms of a spectrum, looking at 4 levels of income gaps to show how people actually live. Because he says that 75% of the population actually lives within this gap. There is no, poor or rich. Most of the people live in between that. And so he says there actually isn't a gap at all. So for example, he'll say level 1 is where 1 billion people live. That's 14% of the world living on $1 a day. Level 2, 3 billion people, which makes up 43% of the world, who make an average of $4 a day. Level 3, 2 billion people, which makes up 29% of the world, living on $16 a day. And finally, 1 billion people on level 4, who are 14% of the population, earning $64 a day. So when you actually look at it, level 2 and 3 comprise a majority of the global population. So he says that the most important challenge we face is developing a fact-based view of the world, not an emotional one or a skewed one. And so if you were to ask, what is being factful? What is factfulness? I think it's being critical, checking our biases, looking for multiple perspectives, and at the end of the day, just being positive about how we approach, looking at things in the world.
Things aren't as bad.
Not at all.
This is the book that inspired Damaging Ignorance. Things are not as bad as they seem.
Exactly.
We missed that show.
He talks about the generalization instinct. That's another one of the instincts which we as human beings are prone to do. And so he says to see the world accurately and to avoid overgeneralization, you need to take in multiple perspectives and understand the world from other people's points of view. And one of the best ways to do that is to travel, to see other cultures firsthand. Or to broaden your sources of information. There's always two sides to a story.
That's a big one.
So if you were to go to Afghanistan today, he says, which is one of the few countries still working to escape extreme poverty, you would still find that there's people who are living relatively well off, who are preparing for modern life, and that sort of has a trickle-down effect to the entire economy. So generally speaking, those are economies and countries which are still on an upward trend. And I would add even DRC and even Somalia. You sit here even in Nairobi and you think there's nothing going on in Somalia. People are killing each other, chopping each other's heads off. No, it's actually a functioning society. And if you went to Somalia, you would be shocked, or DRC. He says a lot of Westerners who traveled to Asia in the 1970s and visited countries like Singapore and South Korea were shocked to see countries rapidly transforming from a third world to a middle income nation under a military dictatorship. And they were shocked because the dominant world view at the time, and still even now, is that development only happens under democratic governments. But he says, once again, that is not necessarily always as it seems. He gives other examples. The 5 fastest growing economies in 2019 are autocratic: Rwanda, Ethiopia, Myanmar.
Wow.
And so he says that the fact of the matter is that the world is a very complicated place, which is why it's important to get as many perspectives as possible.
Yes.
Yeah. So we shouldn't be short-sighted and myopic.
Exactly.
And so he says some of the reasons why people may hold those views is because they think it's deterministic. You think that you can't change it. And he calls this the destiny instinct. The idea that innate characteristics determine the destinies of people, countries, religions, or cultures. So that Africa will always remain poor and Europe will always be wealthy and developed. It's something that we think can't be changed. But he does say that factfulness is about recognizing that many things appear to be constant just because the change is happening very slowly. It's very gradual. However, he tells us to remember that slow change is still change. So if your GDP is rising slowly over time, it's still a change, you know. And then he says the idea is to keep track of these gradual improvements, because a small change every year can translate to a huge change over time. And then he says, update your knowledge, which is what you two have said already. But the one thing that I really took away from it was talk to your grandma and your grandpa. And he says, if you want to be reminded of how values have changed, think about your grandparents' values and how those differ from yours. So the things that were acceptable then may not necessarily, or acceptable now may not have been acceptable then. Your skirts have gotten shorter and nobody has said anything, or maybe now they're saying something, or maybe weed or marijuana might become acceptable in the very near future. And we've already seen trends where countries are legalizing this thing that we're saying is so illegal, right? But the other thing that I thought we should highlight is that he says, of all those instincts, the things that we should remember is that when we go out and we're teaching our children and ourselves, we need to teach them the common ways that people will try to trick them with numbers. So even with, you know, numbers about developing world and developed, those very small those very small nuances between the numbers. And then he says that you can hold two ideas at the same time, that bad things are going on in the world, but there are many things that are getting better. And I think that is the bottom line. And one more thing he does say. So, and it reminded me of Gemma. He says it's easy to understand how claiming a particular destiny of your group can come in useful in uniting that group around a supposedly never changing purpose, and perhaps creating a sense of superiority over other groups. So as we come into 2022 and there are questions about and debates about succession, why does one group feel that they must always dominate?
But one thing came to mind as you were talking, GK. I recently joined TikTok a few weeks ago.
Oh wow!
How progressive of you!
And you know, TikTok is the up and coming app for Generation Z. These are people who are aged 23 years and below. And that is the African continent. This is our average or median age. So I am encouraged to know that in future, our future generations here on the continent are going to be more interconnected. And TikTok is a way, you know, it gives you a perspective into different cultures. Because you do get some Europeans who sample videos from Africa and vice versa. And those are windows through which to see the world.
That's very true.
To broaden your sources of information.
That's a way to travel without actually leaving the country.
Fantastic.
So for all of our audience members, we shall be sharing Jonathan's TikTok username in the description box below.
He can
so these are some of the sources that we can also tap into to see the world without necessarily traveling out there.
Fantastic. So on a day where we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation and a winning cartoon from both the Star and the Daily Nation, I want to leave you with this. Factfulness teaches us that the most important thing is about teaching ourselves and our children to be humble and curious. And being humble here means being aware of how difficult your instincts can make it for you to get the facts right. So it means being happy to say, you know, I don't know. But it also means when you do have an opinion, being prepared to change it when the facts change. So please have a lovely evening. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, but also find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Pankita, and StarTimes.